The sting of betrayal isn't a single event. It's a lingering poison. For Olivia Adler, that poison was administered in a ballroom filled with crystal chandeliers and 100 smiling assassins. Her ex-husband Preston, a man she'd sacrificed everything for, stood with his arm draped around his new fiancée, a woman whose success was built on the ashes of their marriage. He raised a glass, his voice echoing through the microphone, toasting a future she was never meant to have. In that moment, broken and invisible, Olivia had no idea that a forgotten past and an unimaginable fortune were about to collide, turning her world and theirs upside down forever. The annual Sterling Foundation Charity Gala was the glittering pinnacle of the city's social calendar, a place where fortunes were pledged and reputations were cemented. For Olivia Adler, it was the seventh circle of hell, and she was walking into the fire with her eyes wide open. Her boss at the small architectural firm, Mr. Henderson, had insisted the entire team attend. "It's about networking, Olivia," he'd said, oblivious to the personal horror the event represented. 2 years ago, she had walked into this very ballroom on the arm of her then-husband, Preston Montgomery. He was a rising star in private equity, sharp-suited and sharper-witted with an ambition that burned like a furnace. Olivia, a talented but unassuming architectural drafter, had been his steadfast support system. She'd worked extra hours to help him through his MBA, proofread his proposals until her eyes blurred, and put her own career ambitions on the back burner, believing they were building a shared future. That future had shattered 6 months ago. The divorce was swift and brutal. The reason had a name: Brenda Finch. Brenda was a vice president at a rival firm, a woman who moved through the world with the predatory grace of a panther. Preston hadn't just left Olivia. He had upgraded, as he'd once drunkenly implied to a mutual friend. He had traded in a reliable sedan for a high-performance sports car, and tonight they were being celebrated. Preston's firm was a major sponsor of the gala, and he was slated to give a keynote address. Olivia clutched her small, worn handbag, feeling profoundly out of place in her simple, off-the-rack navy dress. All around her were women in designer gowns and jewelry that cost more than her annual salary. She tried to busy herself by the silent auction tables, pretending to study a signed piece of sports memorabilia, when a familiar, dreaded voice cut through the air. "Well, look what the cat dragged in." Olivia's spine stiffened. She turned to see Preston looking insufferably handsome in a custom tuxedo. Beside him, Brenda Finch was a vision in blood-red silk, a massive diamond engagement ring flashing on her finger like a weapon. "Preston," Olivia said, her voice tight. "Brenda, I'm surprised to see you here, Olivia," Brenda said, her smile a perfect painted slash. "I didn't think this was really your scene." The implication was clear. "You don't belong." "My firm has a table," Olivia replied, forcing a polite neutrality she didn't feel. Preston smirked, that familiar condescending tilt of his lips that she now realized was not confidence but pure arrogance. "That's nice. Good for Henderson's little operation. Still drafting blueprints for suburban kitchen remodels." The jab landed precisely where it was intended. Olivia's dream had always been to design sustainable, innovative public spaces, but her current job was creatively stifling a necessity to pay the bills for the cramped apartment she now lived in. "It pays the rent," she said, her cheeks flushing. "I'm sure it does," Preston said, then turned his full attention to Brenda, pulling her closer. "Did you know darling Olivia was the one who encouraged me to get into leveraged buyouts? She used to stay up all night reading financial textbooks with me. A real cheerleader." He said the word cheerleader with a dismissive tone, as if it were a quaint, pathetic hobby. Brenda laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on Olivia's nerves. "How sweet. It's a good thing you found a partner who can play on the field with you, not just watch from the sidelines." The cruelty was breathtaking. Every word was designed to remind Olivia of what she had contributed and what she had lost. She felt the eyes of people nearby turning towards them, sensing the drama. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of her own making. She had to get away. "If you'll excuse me," she mumbled, turning to leave. But Preston wasn't finished. He held up a hand. "Oh, stay for a moment. They're about to introduce me. You should hear the speech. I even give a little nod to the people who helped me get here." His eyes gleamed with malice. He was promising one final public humiliation. As if on cue, the master of ceremonies took the stage. Olivia was frozen trapped in the orbit of their toxic success. A few minutes later, after a glowing introduction, Preston stood at the podium bathed in a spotlight. He was charming, witty, and confident. He spoke of ambition and vision of seizing opportunities. And of course he said, his eyes scanning the crowd and deliberately landing on Olivia, "For a fraction of a second I wouldn't be here without the support of people who believed in me even when my vision surpassed their own understanding. And most importantly, I stand here today because I found a true partner, a woman whose brilliance and drive match my own. To my fiancée Brenda." The room erupted in applause. Brenda blew him a kiss. The spotlight found her and she basked in it. It was a perfectly crafted narrative positioning Olivia as the simple, small-minded first wife who couldn't keep up the necessary but ultimately disposable booster rocket for his ascent to the stars. Olivia felt a wave of nausea. She stumbled back away from the crowd, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She pushed through a set of double doors and found herself on a cold, deserted balcony overlooking the city. The glittering lights of the skyline mocked her. She had given that man the best years of her life, her energy, her dreams. In return, he had erased her from his story, recasting her as a footnote in his grand epic. Leaning against the cold stone balustrade with the sounds of his triumph echoing behind her, Olivia Adler felt a profound and terrifying emptiness. She wasn't just heartbroken, she was utterly and completely erased. The weeks following the gala bled into a monotonous gray. Olivia's life settled into a rhythm of quiet desperation. Wake up in the too-small apartment that smelled faintly of her predecessor's cat. Endure the long commute on a crowded train. Spend 8 hours drafting uninspired designs under the fluorescent hum of her office. Commute home. Eat a microwave dinner for one. Sleep. Repeat. The vibrant colors of her life with Preston had been replaced with a stark, unforgiving monochrome. She actively avoided any news of him and Brenda, unsubscribing from business journals and muting mutual acquaintances on social media. Yet their success seemed to seep through the cracks of her carefully constructed defenses, a headline on a newsstand, a snippet of conversation from the cubicle next to hers. Each mention was a fresh twist of the knife. Her only refuge was her weekly dinner with her best friend Jessica Chen, a sharp-witted journalist who had seen Olivia through the worst of the divorce. "You need to get angry, Liv," Jessica said one evening, stabbing a piece of kung pao chicken with unnecessary force. "Grief is a phase. Right now, you're just letting him live rent-free in your head while he's redecorating his penthouse with that she-devil." "I'm not sad anymore," Olivia lied, pushing a stray noodle around her plate. "I'm just tired." "That's the same thing, just with better PR." Jessica shot back. "You gave him everything. You deserve to be furious." But Olivia couldn't summon the energy for fury. All she felt was a hollow ache, a sense of worthlessness that Preston had so expertly instilled in her. It was on a particularly bleak Tuesday, with rain lashing against her apartment window, that it arrived. Tucked between a credit card offer and a utility bill was a thick cream-colored envelope. It felt heavy, important. The return address was not a name but a crest, an embossed emblem of a stylized bee intertwined with an oak tree. Beneath it were the words "Davies and Associates Attorneys at Law, Beaumont Tower, Geneva, Switzerland." Olivia stared at it bewildered. She knew no one in Switzerland. She had no business with any high-powered law firm. Her first thought was that it was a mistake. Her second, more cynical thought was that it was some kind of elaborate scam. Perhaps Preston had sold her information to mailing lists, and this was the bizarre result. She almost threw it away, but something about the quality of the paper, the crispness of the type, made her hesitate. With a sense of weary curiosity, she sliced it open with a kitchen knife. The letter inside was printed on the same heavy stock. The language was formal, almost archaic. Dear Ms. Adler, this correspondence concerns a matter of the utmost urgency and confidentiality pertaining to the estate of our late client, Mr. Jonathan Beaumont. We have made numerous attempts to locate you and believe with a high degree of certainty that you are the sole surviving heir we have been searching for. It is imperative that you contact our senior partner, Mr. Alistair Davies, at your earliest possible convenience to arrange a meeting. We understand this news may be unexpected. Please be assured of the legitimacy of this communication. A prepaid first-class airline ticket for travel to Geneva has been arranged on your behalf, details of which can be accessed via the enclosed secure reference number. We await your prompt response. Sincerely, Alistair Davies, Senior Partner, Davies & Associates. Olivia read it once, then twice. Jonathan Beaumont. The name meant nothing to her. Sole surviving heir. It had to be a joke. Her family history was painfully simple. Her father, a kind but perpetually struggling artist, had died when she was a teenager. Her mother had passed away from an illness 5 years before that. Both were orphans with no known relatives. She was, as far as she knew, completely alone in the world. This letter felt like something out of a Victorian novel, not a Tuesday in her drab city life. A prepaid ticket to Geneva. The whole thing screamed, scam. They'd probably ask for her bank details to process the inheritance, and then drain her meager savings account. She tossed the letter onto her small kitchen counter next to a stack of unpaid bills. For the rest of the evening she tried to ignore it, but it sat there, a creamy rectangle of impossibility, drawing her eye. Who was Jonathan Beaumont? Why would a Swiss law firm be searching for her? The next day she brought the letter to dinner with Jessica. Her friend, a natural skeptic thanks to her profession, read it with a focused intensity. Olivia expected her to laugh it off to confirm her suspicions of a scam. Instead, Jessica folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. Liv, this is real. What? No, it's not. It's crazy, Olivia said. Look at the letterhead, Jessica said, pointing. The watermarked paper, the embossed seal. This is bespoke stationery that costs a fortune. Scammers use photocopies and fake email addresses. They don't use letterpress and couriers. But the name, Beaumont, it doesn't mean anything to me. Did your mother ever talk about her family? Jessica asked gently. Olivia shook her head. No, never. She always said she was alone, that her parents died when she was very young. It was a sensitive subject. I learned not to ask. Jessica's journalistic instincts were firing on all cylinders. Okay, let's think about this. A reclusive, wealthy client. A search for a long-lost heir. A mother with a mysterious past. This isn't a scam, Liv. This is a story. She pulled out her phone. Davies & Associates, Geneva. A few seconds of furious typing and she turned the screen to Olivia. The law firm was not just real. It was one of the most prestigious and discreet private wealth management firms in the world. Their client list was rumored to include old European royalty and tech billionaires. Beaumont Tower was a real gleaming skyscraper on the shores of Lake Geneva. And look at this, Jessica said, her eyes wide as she scrolled through a series of older financial articles. Jonathan Beaumont. He was a legend. An industrialist and investor. Hugely powerful in the 70s and 80s. Became a complete recluse about 30 years ago. Nicknamed the Phantom of the Alps. He was notoriously private. No one has seen a photo of him in decades. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so outlandish that Olivia could hardly comprehend it. A reclusive billionaire, a mother who never spoke of her past. A life of quiet struggle. Could they all be connected? What if... Olivia started, her voice barely a whisper. What if my mother ran away? What if she was disowned for marrying your father, a poor artist? Jessica finished, her voice full of awe. Liv, this is life-changing. You have to call them. You have to go to Geneva. The thought was terrifying. It meant stepping out of the gray, predictable world she knew into a complete unknown. It meant entertaining a hope so wild it felt dangerous. Hope was a commodity she couldn't afford right now. Failure to manage expectations was what had led her to Preston, and she wouldn't make that mistake again. But as she looked at the letter at the powerful, confident crest of the oak tree, a tiny, forgotten spark of defiance flickered within her. Preston and Brenda had tried to make her feel small, worthless, like a footnote in their story. What if she wasn't a footnote? What if she was the whole damn story? Taking a deep, shaky breath, Olivia Adler made a decision. She was going to Geneva. The flight to Geneva was a surreal experience. Olivia, who had only ever flown economy for a single vacation to Mexico, was now seated in a first-class cabin that was larger than her bedroom. She was served champagne she couldn't pronounce and food on actual porcelain. It felt like a dream she was afraid to wake up from, a fleeting taste of a life that couldn't possibly be hers. With every mile that passed, the absurdity of her situation grew. She was a drafter from a no-name firm flying to meet with legendary lawyers about a billionaire she'd never heard of. It was madness. Geneva was pristine, an oil painting of old-world elegance and modern precision. A silent driver holding a sign with her name met her at the airport and whisked her away in a sleek black sedan. They drove along the edge of the lake past luxury watch boutiques and private banks before pulling up to Beaumont Tower. It was a monument of steel and glass that pierced the clouds, a testament to immense power and wealth. Her heart pounded in her chest as she rode the silent, high-speed elevator to the penthouse floor, which housed the exclusive offices of Davies & Associates. The reception area was less of an office and more of a private museum, with hushed carpets, dark wood paneling, and original modern art on the walls. A severe-looking woman led her to a pair of enormous oak doors. "Mr. Davies will see you now." Alistair Davies was an older gentleman impeccably dressed in a tailored suit with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through her. He rose from behind a desk the size of a small car and extended a hand. His office had a panoramic view of the lake and the jet d'eau. "Ms. Adler, thank you for coming on such short notice. I am Alistair Davies. Please have a seat." His English was perfect, with a faint, unplaceable European accent. Olivia sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The simple navy blazer and slacks she'd thought were professional now felt hopelessly inadequate. "I assume you have many questions," Mr. Davies began, getting straight to the point. "You could say that," Olivia said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Your letter was a shock. I don't know anyone named Jonathan Beaumont." Mr. Davies slid a leather-bound folder across the polished desk. He opened it to the first page, which held a black-and-white photograph of a young, smiling woman with familiar eyes. Olivia gasped. "That's my mother." "Indeed. That is Elizabeth Beaumont, taken shortly before she left her home at the age of 19, Davies confirmed. "Your mother, Ms. Adler." He then proceeded to lay out the story, his tone calm and factual, as if he were explaining a corporate merger and not rewriting the entire history of her life. Jonathan Beaumont was her maternal grandfather. He was a brilliant but fiercely controlling man who had built a global empire from nothing. His only child, Elizabeth, was the light of his life, but he had a specific path laid out for her. A marriage to the son of another industrial titan, a life cementing the Beaumont dynasty. But Elizabeth had fallen in love with a young, penniless American art student, Olivia's father. When she told her father she intended to marry him, he had forbidden it. An explosive argument had ensued. Jonathan had given her an ultimatum: the man she loved or her family and fortune. Elizabeth, young and defiant, chose love. She left in the middle of the night with nothing but a small suitcase, severing all ties. She changed her last name to her husband's, moved to America, and never looked back, so determined to protect her new life from her father's influence that she erased her past completely. Your grandfather, Davies, continued, his expression softening slightly, was a man of immense pride. But his anger eventually faded, replaced by a profound regret. He began searching for your mother about 15 years ago. By the time our investigators found a trace of her, we learned that both she and your father had already passed away. The trail then led us to you. It has been a long and difficult search, Ms. Adler. Olivia felt a wave of dizziness. Her mother, who had clipped coupons and worked 2 jobs, was the heiress to a fortune? The narrative of her life, a simple story of love and loss, was a lie, or at least a heavily edited version. My grandfather. Your letter said he was your late client. Olivia said, the word catching in her throat. Yes. Mr. Beaumont passed away peacefully 2 months ago at the age of 94, Davies said. He spent his final years consumed with the need to right his past wrongs. He amended his will accordingly. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Ms. Adler. Olivia. Jonathan Beaumont left his entire estate to you. Olivia stared at him blankly. His entire estate. That is correct. Beaumont Enterprises. His global portfolio of real estate, his art collection, his liquid assets. You are his sole heir. I don't understand. How much are we talking about? She asked the question, feeling foolish and small in the face of such a revelation. Mr. Davies didn't flinch. He slid another document towards her. It was a summary of assets. The numbers were so long they looked like telephone numbers. She saw the word billion repeated several times. Her eyes scanned the page, but her brain refused to process the figures. It was an astronomical sum, a fortune that could alter nations, let alone the life of a single heartbroken woman. She felt the room tilt. She wasn't just wealthy. She was one of the wealthiest women in the world. However, Mr. Davies said, his voice pulling her back from the brink of fainting, there is a condition. A rather significant one. Of course there was. It couldn't be that simple. Your grandfather, while determined to make you his heir, was also a pragmatist. He did not know you. He could not simply hand over control of a global corporation to a complete stranger, even if she was his blood. His will stipulates a probationary period. Probationary. For 1 year, you will assume a position on the board of Beaumont Enterprises. The company is currently managed by a very capable CEO and a board of directors, some of whom are other family members. Other family members, I thought I was the sole heir. Distant cousins, Davies clarified. Your grandfather's nephew and niece, Jeffrey and Camilla Beaumont. They have managed a subsidiary of the company for years and have long expected to inherit the bulk of the estate. They are displeased by this development. They will be watching you very closely. The trap was set. What do I have to do? Olivia asked. You have to learn, Davies said simply. You have to understand the business, prove your competence, and earn the respect of the board. At the end of the year, the board, including Jeffrey and Camilla, will vote on whether to ratify your position as the new chairwoman and grant you full, unequivocal control of the Beaumont Trust. If you fail to secure their confidence, what happens if I fail? Then the estate's assets will be liquidated and donated to a list of international charities selected by your grandfather. You would be left with a generous but comparatively small trust fund, enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life, but you would have no control over the Beaumont legacy. Olivia's mind was reeling. A year. She had 1 year to go from an architectural drafter to a corporate titan, all while being scrutinized by resentful relatives ready to see her fail. It was an impossible task. The old Olivia, the one who had walked into that gala 2 months ago, would have run screaming from the room. She would have taken the small trust fund and disappeared. But something had changed in her. The humiliation she had suffered at Preston's hands had burned away her naivete. It had left behind a core of hardened steel she didn't know she possessed. Preston had told her she was a cheerleader on the sidelines. Her grandfather, a man she'd never met, was giving her a chance to own the entire stadium. She looked out the window at the city below, at a world of power and influence she never dreamed she could be a part of. This wasn't just about money. It was about legacy. It was about proving to herself and to the ghosts of her past that she was more than what Preston had made her feel. She turned back to Mr. Davies, her expression no longer one of shock, but of quiet, unshakable resolve. When do I start? The transition from Olivia Adler architectural drafter to Olivia Adler probationary board member of a multi-billion-dollar empire was less of a gentle slope and more of a vertical cliff face. Mr. Davies became her Virgil, guiding her through the inferno of high finance. She moved out of her cramped apartment and into a sleek, minimalist penthouse suite at the top of a Beaumont-owned hotel, a temporary residence that came with a staff and a view that made the entire city look like a toy set. Her first few weeks were a relentless boot camp. Her days were filled with tutors. A retired economics professor from Cambridge taught her macroeconomics. A sharp, fast-talking Wall Street veteran taught her portfolio management and market analysis. A prim and proper etiquette coach taught her how to navigate the complex social codes of the ultra-wealthy. Her nights were spent poring over financial reports, corporate histories, and shareholder briefings until the words swam before her eyes. The sheer scale of Beaumont Enterprises was staggering. It wasn't one company. It was a hydra-headed conglomerate with interests in sustainable technology, pharmaceuticals, luxury real estate, and private equity. It was a global force, and she was expected to understand its every moving part. Her first board meeting was a trial by fire. She walked into the cavernous boardroom in Geneva, a room dominated by a table of polished obsidian, feeling like an imposter in her new custom-tailored business suit. The CEO, a capable and unflappable man named Robert Chen, greeted her with professional courtesy. The other board members, seasoned executives from around the world, watched her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. And then there were Jeffrey and Camilla Beaumont. Jeffrey was a portly man in his late 50s with a florid face and an air of perpetual entitlement. Camilla, his sister, was thin and severe with eyes that missed nothing and a smile that never reached them. They represented the old guard, the family members who had been waiting in the wings for decades. The arrival of an unknown granddaughter from America was not just a surprise, it was an insult. Ms. Adler Jeffrey began, his voice oozing false cordiality as the meeting started. "A pleasure to finally meet you. We were all so shocked to learn of your existence. A delightful little family secret." Camilla added, "Indeed, I must confess we're all rather curious. What exactly is your background? My uncle's file on you was rather thin. Something in construction, was it?" She said the word construction as if it were something one might find on the bottom of a shoe. Olivia felt a flush of her old insecurity, but she met their condescending gazes head-on. She had prepared for this with Mr. Davies. "My background is in architecture and design," Olivia said, her voice clear and calm. "I specialize in structural integrity and spatial efficiency. I find it's not so different from analyzing a company. You look for a solid foundation check for stress points and ensure the entire structure is designed for sustainable growth." The answer was unexpected, and a few of the other board members exchanged impressed glances. Jeffrey and Camilla merely looked annoyed. Throughout the meeting, they peppered her with pointed questions using jargon and acronyms designed to trip her up. But Olivia, thanks to her grueling weeks of study, was able to follow along, asking intelligent if basic questions. She didn't pretend to be an expert. She positioned herself as a dedicated student, which to her surprise earned her a measure of grudging respect from the non-family members of the board. After the meeting, Mr. Davies gave her a rare approving nod. "You held your own. They expected a frightened little girl. You did not give them one." But Olivia knew this was just the beginning. To truly prove herself, she needed to do more than just study. She needed to act. An opportunity soon presented itself, one that unexpectedly connected her new life with her old. Mr. Henderson, her old boss, called her in a panic. His small firm, Henderson & Associates, was the target of a hostile takeover. A mid-sized private equity firm, Montgomery Capital, was buying up their debt and trying to force a sale. The plan was to absorb their client list and then dissolve the company, leaving 24 employees jobless. The name hit Olivia like a physical blow. Montgomery Capital. It was Preston's firm, the firm she had helped him dream up. He was a piranha swallowing up smaller fish to fuel his own growth. Her old colleagues, the people she had worked with for years, were about to be casualties of his ambition. The old Olivia would have felt helpless. The new Olivia saw an opportunity. She spent 2 days with her finance tutors analyzing Henderson's company from every angle. It was small, but had a solid reputation, and more importantly, a new division focused on eco-friendly urban planning, an area Olivia was passionate about and knew was undervalued. Preston was only seeing the firm's current modest profits. He was blind to its future potential. She went to Mr. Davies. "I want to make my first move," she said. She laid out her proposal. She wouldn't use Beaumont Enterprises' name directly. Instead, she would use a small pre-existing Beaumont subsidiary, a venture capital fund specializing in green tech, to act. The plan was twofold. First, the fund would buy out all of Henderson & Associates' debt from the various creditors before Preston could consolidate it. Second, it would make a significant equity investment in the firm, giving it the capital to expand its sustainable design division and fight off any further takeover attempts. It was a strategic investment that aligned perfectly with the Beaumont portfolio, but it was also deeply personal. Mr. Davies listened intently, a poker face firmly in place. When she finished, he looked at her for a long moment. "This is clever and aggressive. You would be blocking your ex-husband's business deal." "It's not about him," Olivia said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "This is a good investment. The firm has potential that he's too short-sighted to see, and it protects the jobs of good people. It's a sound business decision that also happens to be the right thing to do." A corner of Mr. Davies' mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. "Your grandfather would have approved of the strategy. He would have been less concerned with the morality." He made a call. The next day the plan was set in motion. The transaction was swift and silent. One by one the debt holders sold to Olivia's subsidiary. Mr. Henderson was informed that a new benevolent investor had saved his company and was funding its future. He had no idea it was Olivia. Meanwhile, in another city, Preston Montgomery was likely fuming, his easy conquest having inexplicably vanished from his grasp. He wouldn't know who had outmaneuvered him, only that a more powerful unseen player had entered the game. Sitting in her penthouse looking over the city, Olivia felt a surge of power that had nothing to do with the money. It was the feeling of competence, the feeling of taking a broken situation and fixing it. She hadn't just learned the language of this new world, she was starting to speak it. And she was beginning to suspect that she was very, very good at it. The cheerleader had just bought the team. 3 months passed. Olivia immersed herself in her new role, traveling the globe to visit Beaumont's various holdings. She walked the floors of pharmaceutical labs in Germany, toured sustainable real estate developments in Singapore, and sat in on strategy sessions in New York. She was a sponge absorbing everything. Her confidence grew with her knowledge. She began to speak up more in board meetings, offering insights from her unique architectural perspective that the finance-brained executives had never considered. Camilla and Jeffrey continued their campaign of subtle condescension, but it was beginning to lose its sting. The other board members were starting to see her not as an interloper, but as an asset. The inevitable collision with her past happened in a glass-walled boardroom on the 50th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. Beaumont Enterprises was in the final stages of acquiring a groundbreaking robotics startup called Synapse Dynamics. It was a major strategic move into AI, and Olivia had been a vocal champion of the deal. On the day the final papers were to be signed, however, a complication arose. A smaller, aggressive private equity firm had launched a last-minute long-shot competing bid, forcing a face-to-face meeting with Synapse's board. Olivia, along with Robert Chen, the CEO, and 2 of Beaumont's top lawyers, walked into the meeting room. The Synapse team was already seated, and on the other side of the table, representing the competing bidders, were 2 figures who made the blood freeze in her veins: Preston Montgomery and Brenda Finch. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. Olivia could hear the frantic beat of her own heart. Preston was in the middle of a confident laugh with one of the Synapse board members. He looked up as the Beaumont team entered, his smile ready, his hand outstretched. His eyes met Robert Chen's, then moved to the woman standing beside him. His smile didn't just falter, it evaporated. The color drained from his face. His hand, which had been extended for a handshake, hung awkwardly in the air. He looked at Olivia as if he were seeing a ghost in a $4,000 power suit. Brenda's reaction was even more pronounced. Her perfectly made-up face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her jaw literally dropped. The pen in her hand clattered onto the polished mahogany table. Olivia, however, felt a strange, icy calm settle over her. All those nights studying all those challenges from her cousins, all the pressure, it had forged something new inside her. She held Preston's gaze for a heartbeat, offering no recognition, no flicker of their shared past. Then she coolly looked away, turning her attention to the head of the synapse board. "Good morning, Mr. Webb," she said, her voice even and professional. "I am Olivia Adler from the Beaumont board. Thank you for accommodating this meeting." The name Adler didn't register with Preston. He had only ever known her as Olivia Montgomery. But Beaumont, the name hung in the air like a thunderclap. The meeting began and the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Preston was completely off his game. He stumbled over his opening remarks, his usual slick presentation reduced to a series of nervous platitudes. He kept glancing at Olivia, his mind clearly racing, trying to solve an impossible equation. How was the timid little drafter he'd discarded sitting at the table with one of the most powerful private corporations in the world? Brenda, after her initial shock, tried to recover. She jumped in, attempting to steer their presentation back on track, but her voice was a little too sharp, her smile a little too brittle. She looked at Olivia with a venomous jealousy that was almost palpable. When it was Beaumont's turn, Robert Chen laid out their offer, a comprehensive long-term strategic partnership that promised not just capital, but access to Beaumont's global research and distribution networks. Then he turned to Olivia. "Ms. Adler has been the driving force behind our interest in Synapse. Perhaps she could share her vision for your technology." This was it, the moment she had been unknowingly preparing for. She stood feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on her, especially Preston's. "Mr. Webb," she began, her voice resonating with a quiet confidence she never knew she possessed. "Montgomery Capital sees Synapse as an asset to be acquired, leveraged, and likely sold for a profit in 5 years. They are financiers. They see a balance sheet." She saw Preston flinch at the directness of her attack. "We at Beaumont see something different. We see a future. My background is in design and structure. I see the bones of things. And Synapse's AI isn't just a product. It's a foundational technology. We don't want to buy you. We want to build with you. We envision your robotics integrated into our automated pharmaceutical labs, your predictive AI optimizing our sustainable urban developments. We offer not an exit strategy, but a legacy." She spoke for 10 minutes, her arguments clear, insightful, and passionate. She laid out a detailed decade-long vision that was so far beyond Preston's simple financial bid that it made his offer look amateurish and predatory. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Mr. Webb and his board were visibly impressed. Preston, desperate to regain control, jumped in. "That's a very romantic vision, Ms. Adler," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, trying to re-establish their old dynamic. "But in the real world, business is about numbers. Our offer is solid, liquid, and immediate." He tried to use her old last name, a slip of the tongue that was both a mistake and a power play. "Ms. Adler, perhaps you're not familiar with the pressures of this market." Olivia didn't even look at him. She addressed her comments to Mr. Webb. "Some people can only see the price of things, not their value. We believe Synapse's value is immeasurable, and we are prepared to invest in it for the long term. Our offer reflects that." The meeting concluded shortly after. As they were packing their briefcases, Preston cornered her by the door while Brenda watched from a distance, her arms crossed. "Olivia," he hissed, his voice low and urgent. "What is this? What the hell is going on? She finally turned to face him, her expression as placid as a frozen lake. I'm not sure I understand the question, Mr. Montgomery. Don't play dumb with me, Beaumont. How my family has been in business for quite some time, she said, the statement both true and intentionally evasive. His face cycled through confusion, then dawning greedy realization. Your family, you come from money. You never told me. The sheer audacity of it, the immediate assumption that she had hidden wealth from him was almost comical. The things you don't know about me could fill a library. Preston, she said softly. She then looked past him at Brenda, who was glaring daggers at her. Olivia offered her a tiny dismissive smile. It was a pleasure competing with you, she said, the words a master class in professional dismissal. I'm sure we'll see each other around. She walked out of the boardroom, leaving Preston and Brenda standing amidst the wreckage of their failed bid, staring after a woman they thought they knew, a woman who had just dismantled them without even raising her voice. The cheerleader hadn't just bought the team. She had just beaten the star quarterback at his own game on his own field. And she knew with chilling certainty that this was only the beginning. The Synapse Dynamics deal closed in Beaumont's favor a week later. The victory was sweet not because she had beaten Preston, but because she had won on her own merits. The win solidified her standing with the board, and even Jeffrey and Camilla's snide remarks became less frequent. They now watched her with a wary resentment rather than open disdain. But Olivia's analytical mind couldn't let go of a detail from the failed bid. Preston's offer for Synapse had been recklessly high, almost desperately so. It was an all-cash offer that for a firm of his size would have represented a massive financial stretch. It wasn't ambitious, it was foolish. Why was he gambling so aggressively? Driven by a mix of professional curiosity and a lingering sense of self-preservation, she decided to dig deeper. She now had the vast resources of Beaumont Enterprises at her disposal. She made a quiet request to Beaumont's internal corporate intelligence division, a team of forensic accountants and analysts who could uncover the financial secrets of entire nations. I want a full deep dive workup on Montgomery Capital, she told the division head. Everything. Debt structure, investment vehicles, cash flow, key partners. I want to see their entire house of cards. While the investigation hummed along in the background, Olivia had to deal with a more immediate threat. Camilla and Jeffrey, seeing their chances of ousting her dwindle, decided to play their final, dirtiest card. A story suddenly appeared in a notorious European tabloid syndicated online across the world. The headline was "Salacious Billionaire's Secret Granddaughter, a Chambermaid's Child. The Battle for the Beaumont Fortune Turns Ugly." The article, filled with anonymous family sources, painted Olivia as a grasping opportunist. It fabricated a story that her father was not a poor artist, but a hotel porter with whom her mother had a scandalous affair. It claimed Olivia had known about her connection to the Beaumonts for years and had orchestrated a scheme to swindle the true heirs. It was a vile classist attack designed to paint her as illegitimate, unworthy, and a fraud. The blow was personal and public. Her phone lit up with calls from Mr. Davies and the Beaumont PR team. The board was in an uproar. Camilla and Jeffrey feigned outrage. "This is a disgusting attack on our family's integrity," Jeffrey boomed in an emergency conference call. "We must find the source of these lies." Olivia knew with absolute certainty that the source was on that call. But she had no proof. For the first time, she felt the immense pressure of her position. The world was watching. Her family was trying to destroy her. She didn't crumble. She got to work. She called Jessica Chen not as a friend, but as a professional. "Jess, I need a journalist, the best. I need to trace the source of a story, and I need to do it quietly." Jessica, fiercely loyal, mobilized her network. Within 48 hours, she had a name, a freelance gossip columnist known for taking cash for stories. A little more digging, facilitated by a Beaumont security consultant, uncovered a series of encrypted messages and an offshore wire transfer. The money had been funneled through a shell corporation, but the trail ultimately led back to a holding company owned by Jeffrey Beaumont. It was the smoking gun. Armed with this evidence, Olivia didn't go to the press. She went to the board. In a closed-door emergency session, she presented her findings calmly and methodically: the digital trail, the financial records, the irrefutable link to her cousins. The silence in the room was absolute. Camilla's face was ashen. Jeffrey was sweating profusely, his florid face turning a shade of purple. They had been caught, their petty, vicious scheme laid bare. This was not a business disagreement. Olivia said, her voice low but carrying the weight of command. This was an attempt to destroy my reputation and destabilize this company for personal gain. This is a betrayal not just of me but of my grandfather's legacy and the duty we all have to this board. The vote was unanimous. Jeffrey and Camilla Beaumont were stripped of their board seats and their executive positions effective immediately. They were escorted from the building by security, their decades of scheming ending not with a bang, but with a quiet, humiliating walk of shame. Just as the dust was settling on her internal victory, the head of corporate intelligence delivered his report on Montgomery Capital. It was far worse than Olivia could have imagined. Preston's firm was not just over-leveraged, it was a fraud. He had built his success on a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. He used massive influxes of cash from new investors to pay off earlier ones, all while reporting inflated imaginary profits. The entire enterprise was hollow. He funneled millions into offshore accounts to fund his and Brenda's lavish lifestyle. The penthouse, the sports cars, the designer clothes, the very ring on her finger were all paid for with stolen money. The report concluded that Montgomery Capital was on the verge of collapse. The desperate all-cash offer for Synapse Dynamics had been a last-ditch effort to acquire a legitimate high-value asset that could be used as collateral to secure more funding and keep the scheme alive for another cycle. If he had won that deal, he would have sucked Synapse dry and destroyed it. Olivia hadn't just outmaneuvered him, she had inadvertently saved an innocent company from his parasitic grasp. Staring at the report, Olivia felt a cold clarity. This was bigger than their personal history. Preston wasn't just an arrogant ex-husband, he was a criminal who had defrauded dozens of investors, many of whom were pension funds and retirement accounts. He was ruining innocent people's lives. She thought about the humiliation he had put her through, the condescending smirks, the casual cruelty. She could, with a single phone call, leak the report to the financial press and watch his empire burn. It would be the ultimate revenge. But as she looked out at the city from her grandfather's office, she realized revenge was too small a motive. This was about justice. It was about responsibility. Her grandfather hadn't just left her his money. He had left her his power, and power was a burden as much as it was a privilege. She picked up the phone, but she didn't call a journalist. She called Mr. Davies. "Alistair," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "I need you to arrange a meeting for me with the Securities and Exchange Commission." She wasn't just going to watch his house of cards fall. She was going to be the one to push it over. The stage for the final act was fittingly another charity gala. This time, it was the prestigious Children's Hospital Foundation Ball, an event where the city's old money and new tech titans mingled. Beaumont Enterprises was the lead sponsor, and as the newly consolidated power on the board, Olivia was expected to give the opening address. She stood backstage, elegant in a deep emerald gown, a stark contrast to the simple navy dress she had worn to the gala that had started it all. She was no longer the invisible woman shrinking in the corner. She was the center of gravity in the room. Out in the ballroom, Preston and Brenda were making their rounds. To the outside world, they were still the golden couple. News of their failed Synapse bid had been a minor setback, but Preston, a master of spin, had brushed it off as a strategic retreat. They had no idea that federal investigators, armed with the meticulously detailed dossier Olivia had provided, had spent the last 2 weeks building an ironclad case against Montgomery Capital. They had no idea that their world was about to end. Olivia watched them on a monitor. Preston was holding court, a glass of champagne in his hand, laughing his confident laugh. Brenda stood beside him, preening under the admiring gazes, her diamond ring flashing under the chandeliers. They were performing their success, oblivious to the fact that the curtain was about to come down. It was time. Olivia walked onto the stage to a round of warm applause. She approached the podium, her gaze sweeping across the sea of faces. She saw Preston look up at her, a flicker of something, annoyance, resentment in his eyes. She began her speech not with platitudes about charity, but with a story about her grandfather. She spoke of his belief that true wealth wasn't about accumulation, but about building things that last: companies, communities, and most importantly, trust. Trust, she said. Her eyes finding Preston's in the crowd, is the bedrock of everything we do, in business and in life. It is a fragile thing, easily broken. And when it is broken, not for reasons of failure or misfortune, but through deliberate deception, the damage can be catastrophic. A subtle shift occurred in the room. This was not the standard fundraising speech. As she spoke, two well-dressed but stern-looking men entered the ballroom from a side entrance, followed by two more. They moved quietly, professionally, their eyes scanning the room. They were not guests. Olivia continued, her voice steady. There are those who build their empires on foundations of integrity. And there are those who build houses of cards, dazzling illusions designed to fool the world, propped up by deceit. But a house of cards, no matter how grand, can never withstand the slightest breeze of truth. Preston's smile was gone. He was looking at the men now, a dawning horror on his face. Brenda, sensing the change in his demeanor, looked from him to the agents, her expression turning from smugness to confusion. The agents were moving towards their table. Tonight we are here to support an institution built on trust and care, Olivia said, her voice rising with finality. Let us be reminded that our community is only as strong as its most honest members, and let us have the courage to hold accountable those who would tear it down for their own selfish gain. She finished her speech, and the room, sensing the undercurrent of immense drama, responded with thunderous applause. But Olivia's attention, and everyone else's, was now on Preston's table. One of the agents leaned down and spoke quietly to Preston. Mr. Preston Montgomery, I'm Agent Miller with the SEC Enforcement Division. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. Please come with us. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Phones were instantly raised, recording the scene. Brenda let out a small, strangled cry, stumbling back from the table as if Preston were suddenly contagious. Preston's face was a mask of disbelief and fury. This is ridiculous. It's a mistake, he blustered, but there was no conviction in his voice. There's no mistake, sir, the agent said, his voice flat. As they handcuffed him, Preston's wild, panicked eyes found Olivia on the stage. She was standing perfectly still, watching the scene unfold, not with glee or triumph, but with a calm, somber finality. In that moment, he understood. The anonymous competitor who had snatched Henderson's firm. The mysterious power player at the Synapse meeting. The breeze of truth that had just blown over his house of cards. It was all her. He was led out of the ballroom, past the shocked faces of the city's elite, a babbling, pathetic shell of the titan he pretended to be. Brenda stood alone, a pariah in her blood-red dress, the diamond on her finger suddenly looking like a piece of cheap glass. Later that evening, as news of the arrest exploded online, a journalist caught Olivia as she was leaving. Ms. Adler, your speech was incredibly timely. Do you have any comment on the arrest of Preston Montgomery? A man, sources say, you have a personal history with Olivia. Looked into the camera, her expression composed and powerful. Mr. Montgomery's downfall was a result of his own choices. My grandfather's company, Beaumont Enterprises, was made aware of certain financial irregularities, and as is our corporate and ethical duty, we passed that information on to the proper authorities. Our only interest is in maintaining a fair and transparent market for all investors. I have no further comment on my personal history. It was a perfect, devastatingly professional statement. It positioned her not as a vengeful ex-wife, but as a principled corporate leader. A protector of the legacy she now fully controlled. She walked away from the cameras, leaving the frenzy behind. She didn't feel the thrill of revenge she might have once craved. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of peace. The ghosts of her past had been laid to rest not by bitterness, but by her own competence, strength, and integrity. She had not only stepped out of Preston's shadow, she had become a force of nature that cast a shadow of her own, one built not on lies, but on the solid foundation of the Beaumont name, a name she had truly made her own. Olivia Adler's journey from a humiliated ex-wife to a billionaire powerhouse is more than just a revenge story. It's a powerful testament to the strength that lies dormant within us all. It shows that our past does not have to define our future, and that true power isn't found in wealth, but in self-worth, integrity, and the courage to rewrite our own narrative. She didn't just inherit a fortune. She earned her legacy. What did you think of Olivia's incredible transformation? Was her final move against Preston justice or revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you and discussing every twist and turn of the story. If you were captivated by Olivia's rise from the ashes, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves a story of ultimate triumph. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next gripping tale. Thank you for listening.